Why being highly intelligent feels like a curse. Schopenhauer, what if the very thing that sets you apart, the sharpness of your mind, the depth of your insight, is also the source of your greatest suffering? What if being highly intelligent isn't a blessing in the way we're taught to believe, but a slow burning curse that subtly isolates, burdens, and disorients you from the world? That's the question we're exploring today. And to understand it fully, we need to go down into the dark depths of one of history's most brutally honest thinkers, Arthur Schopenhauer. If you've ever felt like your intelligence separates you more than it connects you, if you've ever wondered why life feels more painful the more you understand it, then this video is for you. Let's begin with a paradox. Intelligence is supposed to make life better, right? You solve problems faster, you understand people more deeply, you see patterns others miss. And yet, the more intelligent you are, the more likely you are to experience depression, existential dread, isolation, and a haunting sense that others are sleepwalking through a world you can't unsee. Why is that? Schopenhauer believed it boils down to awareness. The more aware you are, the more you see the truth of existence. And the truth, he argued, is deeply painful. Life is suffering, he said. At its core, life is driven by an irrational, insatiable force of blind, thrashing will that pushes all beings to desire, to strive, to want more endlessly. And the more intelligent you are, the more you see through the illusions that normally keep people content. You begin to see that most pursuit, status, wealth, romance, or distractions from the underlying futility of it all. This is the first layer of the curse. You can't pretend anymore. You can't just chase what others chase without feeling a sense of falseness. You see through the charades. You notice the emptiness behind the smiles, the manipulation behind the praise, the hollowness of social games. And that clarity can be alienating. You want authentic connection, but how do you connect when your perception constantly dissects what others take for granted? It's like living in a world where everyone else is speaking a language of illusion and you're stuck translating every word into brutal honesty.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Schopenhauer once wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. For the highly intelligent, solitude often feels like the only place where the mind can breathe. But that very solitude becomes a double-edged sword. You crave companionship, but you're also exhausted by the surface-level interactions that most people are satisfied with. You want to talk about death, time, consciousness, meaning, but others want to talk about weekend plans and reality TV. And so you either suppress your thoughts to fit in, or you express them and feel misunderstood. Either path leads to a kind of loneliness that isn't just social, it's existential. Have you ever felt surrounded by people, yet completely alone? Have you ever looked at the world and thought, am I the only one who sees how strange this all is? That's not arrogance. That's not superiority. That's awareness. And awareness, as Schopenhauer warned, is often a burden. The intelligent person sees the absurdity of life not as a joke, but as a stark reality. We're thrown into existence without choice, driven by desires we didn't design, aging every second, destined to die, all while pretending this is normal. How could anyone not feel disturbed by that? But here's where it gets even deeper. Schopenhauer believed that intelligence increases sensitivity. Not just emotional sensitivity, but metaphysical sensitivity. The highly intelligent person feels the pain of the world more acutely. You're not just aware of your own suffering, you can't help but absorb the suffering of others. You walk into a room and feel the tension. You watch the news and feel the despair. You read a poem and it wrecks you for days. It's as if your nervous system is tuned to a higher frequency, picking up signals others don't even notice. And when you try to explain this, people tell you to lighten up or stop overthinking. But you're not overthinking, you're seeing. And that seeing cuts deep. So what do you do with all this awareness? How do you stay sane when your mind won't stop analyzing, critiquing, unraveling every thread it touches? That's where Schopenhauer offers a dark but strangely liberating insight. Stop fighting the pain. Accept it. Understand that suffering is not an error in the system, it is the system. And in accepting that, in fully digesting the bleakness of it all, something strange happens. You begin to detach. Not in a cold, nihilistic way, but in a conscious, philosophical way. You stop expecting the world to make you happy. You stop demanding that people understand you. And in that release, there is peace. But here's the haunting question. If intelligence leads to awareness, and awareness leads to suffering, is ignorance truly bliss? Would you trade your mind for comfort? Would you choose illusion over truth if it meant you could finally feel at home in this world? Or is there a kind of nobility in seeing the world as it truly is, even if it hurts? The loneliness of clarity, why you can see everything but still feel invisible there, is a peculiar kind of loneliness that no one warns you about. It's not the loneliness of being physically alone, nor the loneliness of being unloved. It's the loneliness of clarity, of seeing too much, of understanding too deeply, of perceiving what others don't, or perhaps what they won't. Schopenhauer understood this better than most. He wasn't merely a pessimist, he was a man cursed by vision. He saw the machinery of life without the comforting veil that shields most people from its cold mechanics. And when you possess that kind of clarity, the world doesn't become more vibrant, it becomes more distant. You begin to realize that the more clearly you see, the more invisible you feel. Not because others can't see you, but because they can't see what you see. It's a strange paradox. Your mind becomes a telescope powerful enough to perceive the vastness of existence, and yet no one else seems to be looking through the same lens. So you stand there pointing at the stars while others are fixated on the shadows cast by streetlights. You try to share what you see, truths, patterns, absurdities, even beauty, but most people don't respond with awe. They respond with confusion, discomfort, or disinterest. And so slowly you begin to retreat. You stop sharing your observations because you're tired of the blank stares. You stop engaging in conversations that feel like reruns. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny just to belong. You wear a mask not out of deception, but out of mercy. Because you've learned that most people don't want depth. They want comfort. They want distraction. They want stories with clear heroes and villains, not the tangled mess of human motives that you see. And when you offer them reality, they flinch. This is the second layer of the curse, the painful realization that intelligence doesn't just isolate you intellectually, it isolates you emotionally. You feel emotions more deeply, but you have fewer places to express them authentically. You understand people more profoundly, but that understanding doesn't bring you closer. It often reveals how fundamentally alone we all are in our private experiences. You crave connection, but you're constantly translating your thoughts into palatable versions that others can digest. And that translation process is exhausting. Have you ever been in a room full of people and felt like you were on a different planet? Like everyone was speaking a language you once knew but have long since outgrown? That's not a sign of arrogance. It's a symptom of clarity. You see the subtext, the motivations, the insecurities behind every word. You see the performance, the roles we all play to maintain the illusion of normalcy. And while others laugh and drink and scroll through their phones, you stand there quietly observing the absurd theater of it all. Schopenhauer believed that the more intelligent a person is, the more they gravitate toward solitude, not because they dislike people, but because they need space to process the weight of their perceptions. Solitude becomes a refuge, a place where your mind can stretch without apology. But even solitude can become a prison if it's not chosen freely. When you're alone, because no one else can meet you where you are, it doesn't feel like freedom, it feels like exile. And this exile isn't just from society, it's from simplicity, from ease, from the ability to just be without analyzing every detail. High intelligence doesn't come with an off switch. Your mind is always on, always dissecting, always reaching into the depths of existence. You can't walk through a forest without thinking about entropy. You can't watch a movie without noticing the existential themes. You can't even fall in love without analyzing the neurological, psychological, and philosophical implications of attachment. It's not that you don't feel joy, wonder, or love. You do, often more intensely than others. But those feelings are rarely pure. They're always tinged with awareness, with context, with the knowledge of how fleeting and fragile they truly are. So what do you do with this loneliness? How do you live in a world where you can see everything yet still feel unseen? Schopenhauer didn't offer false hope. He didn't believe the world could be fixed or that suffering could be eliminated. But he did suggest that through art, philosophy, and contemplation, we could transcend it, at least temporarily. When you read a book that reflects your own thoughts, when you hear a piece of music that touches something primal inside you, when you lose yourself in a moment of pure perception, you remember that you're not entirely alone. That there are others, past and present, who have stood where you're standing, who have seen what you see. And maybe that's the quiet miracle of clarity. That even in the depths of your isolation, you can find echoes of your mind in the works of others. That even if no one around you understands, someone once did. And they left breadcrumbs for you: poems, paintings, symphonies, philosophies. Schopenhauer himself, with all his bleakness, left a trail. Not out of optimism, but out of honesty. And in that honesty, there is a kind of communion. So let me ask you something. If you were given the choice to see less and feel more accepted, or to see more and walk mostly alone, which would you choose? And is it possible that the very loneliness you feel is not a punishment, but a sign that you are awake in a world that prefers to sleep? The curse of meaning, how intelligence turns life into a constant why to be highly intelligent, is to live in a constant interrogation of life. Not just of facts, but of meaning. The mind, sharp and restless, refuses to let things simply be. It demands reasons. It dissects motives. It peels away the layers of appearance to reveal the machinery underneath, and when it does, it often doesn't like what it finds. This is where the curse deepens. Because once you begin to ask why, you can never unask it. The question becomes a ghost that haunts every experience, every relationship, every moment of stillness. Why are we here? Why do we desire? Why do we suffer? Why does anything matter at all? Most people don't live with that constant hum of existential dissonance. They follow scripts, embrace rituals, accept inherited beliefs without too much resistance. But the highly intelligent mind doesn't find comfort in default answers. It pushes further, often to places that are unsettling. It uncovers contradictions in religion, absurdities in tradition, and shallowness in popular culture. And once that veil has been lifted, it's nearly impossible to put it back. The world becomes a puzzle with no clear picture, just infinite pieces that may or may not fit together. And the more you try to assemble them into something coherent, the more you realize the picture may have never existed at all. Schopenhauer saw this clearly. He believed that human life driven by desire was inherently meaningless. That we are thrown into this world without consent, pushed by an irrational will to chase things that never truly satisfy us, only to age, decay, and die. And yet, we are cursed with consciousness, the ability to reflect on our condition, to seek meaning in a universe that offers none. Intelligence magnifies that reflection. It forces us to confront not only the absurdity of existence, but the terrifying freedom it presents. We are free to choose, but we are not free from the consequences of choice. We are free to search for meaning, but we are not guaranteed to find it. This is where the intelligent suffer most, not from external conditions, but from the weight of internal questioning. You can't look at a smiling child without thinking of impermanence. You can't fall in love without recognizing the inevitable loss. You can't even enjoy a beautiful day without the whisper of its brevity in the back of your mind. Everything is shadowed by the awareness of time, entropy, and the absurd. And yet, We still long for purpose as if it were oxygen. That longing, paired with the inability to truly fulfill it, creates a kind of philosophical vertigo. You're suspended between two truths that life demands meaning, and that meaning is, at best, uncertain at worst, an illusion we construct to keep ourselves sane. But perhaps the most painful part is how this quest for meaning isolates you from the everyday world. You watch people passionately argue over things you see as trivial. You see them build their identities around politics, brands, careers, things that seem, in your view, paper thin compared to the vast unknown we all float inside. And yet you envy them. You envy their conviction, their simplicity, their ability to just live without constantly questioning the scaffolding of their beliefs. You wish sometimes that you could believe the way they do, but your mind won't let you. It keeps probing, digging, dismantling, and in that relentless pursuit, you find yourself further and further from the comfort of collective illusion. So what can we do? How do we live with this curse, this endless why that intelligence plants in the soul? Schopenhauer didn't offer easy answers, but he hinted at a path: aesthetic contemplation. When we lose ourselves in music, in art, in the beauty of nature, we momentarily escape the tyranny of the will. We become pure perception, detached from desire, from analysis, from the burden of being a self. In those rare moments, we are not asking why, we are simply being. And that, he believed, was the closest thing to relief a conscious being could experience. And yet, those moments are fleeting. We always return to the questions, to the gnawing hunger for coherence. So maybe the challenge isn't to solve the puzzle of meaning, but to learn to live with the puzzle itself. To hold the questions without demanding final answers. To find beauty not in certainty, but in the courage to keep looking. Maybe intelligence isn't about knowing more. Maybe it's about learning how to carry the weight of not knowing with grace. So I ask you, if life has no inherent meaning, is that a curse or an opportunity? What if the absence of meaning is the ultimate freedom? What if you are the meaning you've been searching for, not as a fixed truth, but as a living question? It's against the world. How Schopenhauer's pessimism can lead to personal liberation if everything we've said so far feels heavy, like a weight dragging you deeper into existential despair. You're not alone. That's the natural response to Schopenhauer's philosophy. His worldview is often called bleak, even nihilistic. But what if that bleakness is actually a door? What if his pessimism isn't the end, but the beginning of a new kind of freedom? That's the paradox most people miss. Schopenhauer didn't preach despair for its own sake. He saw the truth of suffering not to paralyze us, but to liberate us from illusions, from false hopes, and most importantly, from the compulsive striving that traps so many of us in lives we don't understand. You see, once you accept that life is fundamentally unsatisfying, you no longer need to chase the things that promise fulfillment but never deliver it. Schopenhauer believed that most human misery comes from our endless desire, from our belief that happiness is just one success, one relationship, one purchase away. But when you truly absorb his insight that desire itself is the root of suffering, you begin to detach. Not in a cold or cynical way, but in a clear, conscious way. You stop expecting the world to complete you. You stop demanding that life give you something it was never designed to give. And in that letting go, you find something rare: peace. This is what Schopenhauer called resignation, not giving up, but giving into reality. It's the moment you stop struggling against the flow of life and start observing it with calm detachment. You still act, you still care, but you do so without clinging, without the desperate need for things to be different than they are. And once you reach that state, a strange thing happens: you become powerful. Not in the loud, aggressive way the world usually defines power, but in the quiet, unshakable way of someone who has nothing to prove and nothing to lose. You become immune to the games others are still trapped in. And perhaps that's the true gift of high intelligence, not the ability to solve complex problems, but the ability to see the uselessness of most of them. It's to see through the social performances, the shallow pursuits, the frantic need for validation. You realize that most people are sprinting through life without asking where they're going or why. You, however, have stopped. You've looked around. You've asked the hard questions. And while the answers may not be comfortable, they are real. And there is something deeply grounding about living in reality, even when it hurts. So what now? What does life look like once you've seen its absurdity, its impermanence, its suffering? It looks like gratitude. Not the superficial kind that demands you smile through pain, but the deeper kind that comes from realizing that anything, even a single moment of beauty, of love, of laughter is miraculous in a world where nothing is guaranteed. Schopenhauer found solace in art, in music, in moments of pure perception where the self dissolves. You can too. Intelligence may curse you with awareness, but it also gives you the tools to transmute that awareness into wisdom. Because the truth is, we're all in this together. Conscious, suffering beings trying to make sense of a world that doesn't offer clear explanations. The more intelligent you are, the more deeply you feel that, the more urgently you search. But maybe the point isn't to find the answer. Maybe the point is to become the kind of person who can live without one and still create beauty, still offer love, still stand with dignity in the face of the unknown. So I'll leave you with this. If intelligence is a curse, then let it be a sacred one. Let it be the fire that burns away illusion, that sharpens your compassion, that deepens your connection to others who also walk this difficult path. You may never feel at home in this world, but you can learn to feel at home in yourself. And that, perhaps, is the only liberation that truly matters.